creates questions the human mind cannot answer. Out of reach, past all we can see, hear, and touch, beyond all we understand, lies the extraordinary. The extraordinary is this dark and brooding lighthouse on Kangaroo Island in the Southern Ocean. To many, a beacon of safety, but others say it's home to a ghost.
Whatever it was in there didn't want me in there. So I put my guitar in the case and I felt my way down the steps. I felt uncomfortable.
It is the vision of a flaxen-haired youth who came to veteran actor Mickey Rooney in a restaurant.
And he leaned over very quickly to me and he said,
"Are you Mickey Rooney?"
I was just stupefied. I didn't know how to assimilate what had just been told to me.
Nobody else at the table saw or heard the young man. It is the day a road accident played host to a coincidence that will never be explained.
Hey, guy, my name's Constable Trevor Smith. What's your name?
Russell Smith.
Hello, I'm Ross Smith from the ambulance.
Hi, I'm Robin Smith from Jeff White's panels.
Everyone involved had one thing in common. The odds of it happening, incalculable.
So what was beginning of a lovely day, a disastrous day, ended up in a very weird and funny day.
It is the spirit guide that has been part of the life of international musical star June Bromhill for more than 20 years.
Hallelujah, hallelujah. And that is Amalicia helping me.
Please, Lita. Please help me.
Just some of the stories that lie beyond our normal understanding. Tonight on The Extraordinary.
More on that remarkable story later. Good evening. I'm Warwick Moss. At times, Kangaroo Island is a dark and desolate place. When the wind blows in from the Southern Ocean, it cuts like a knife. Waves crash on sheer cliffs, and the only light comes from a lighthouse on Cape Willoughby. It was at this lighthouse that Clive and Robin Daniels found themselves one night. They thought they were alone. They were not. Kangaroo Island is just off the South Australian coast. 4,500 square kilometres of pristine beauty. A place steeped in history. This is the Southern Ocean. Down that way, the Antarctic. Over there, mainland Australia. It's rugged down here. A rocky island that at times is buffeted by ferocious seas and brutish winds. For sailors, Cape Willoughby has long been a welcome sight. It offered solace, confirmation of course, and safety. But for some, the lighthouse on those sharp cliffs is a dark and frightening place. Songwriter Clive Daniels and his wife Robin have experienced the tranquility, the solitude, and the mystery of Cape Willoughby and its lighthouse, the first one built in South Australia in 1852.
If I could put it into words, this place is a poet's dream. It's one of fascination and the unknown.
Back in April 1993, the Daniels, along with members of their family and friends, were here for a weekend reunion. They had the Cape to themselves. Even the ranger was away. And from the very start, there were ominous signs that this was to be no ordinary holiday. The first member of the party to sense something strange was Clive's sister, Shirley Buckley.
I put my things on the bed and I really felt uncomfortable. It was really, really very cold. And I thought, I don't like it. There's a bad atmosphere in there. I didn't like it at all.
The first night passed peacefully enough, and Clive Daniels was getting down to the serious business of songwriting. By the second night, he knew exactly where and when he'd find his inspiration. Up in the old lighthouse at midnight. It was a night just like this, cold, still, and crystal clear, that things started to change for Clive. What was to follow would almost literally scare he and his wife out of their wits. The lighthouse was deserted. Clive had the only key. All was silent, except for the waves crashing down below. The lamp above swept its arc across the lonely sea. As Clive gingerly made his way through the eerie labyrinth by torchlight, he was oblivious to the gloom around him. Already, words and music were floating through his mind.
Footsteps in the night, I hear calling. Footsteps in the night, in the door.
As he settled down at the very top of the lighthouse to compose, the atmosphere inside slowly began to change, slowly began to seem threatening.
I heard a creaking sound, and it was almost like a wooden door opening. Just a slow but a definite creak of wood. And that sort of baffled me a bit because there's no wooden door there. And then I heard footsteps coming down.
Naturally, he was nervous. But then, inexplicably, his torch died on him. A torch with a brand new battery. And all about him, inside the darkened lighthouse, Clive could feel a presence like nothing on earth.
It was just like an icy cold mist that was all around me. It almost touched me, but when I reached out, I could feel it. It was a dry, icy cold chill. And as you reached into it, you could feel, you knew that something was there, believe me. You knew that it was watching you, yet you couldn't see it.
Icy cold. So cold, Clive could feel the shivers down his spine. The shivers of fear.
I thought for the first time in my life, it's time to go. I knew whatever it was in there didn't want me in there. So I put my guitar in the case and I felt my way down the steps. At the same time, with my right hand, I was trying to find the key to the lighthouse so I could get out there and lock it up and just leave. I felt uncomfortable there.
Darkness, strange noises, icy pockets of air, and not a soul to be seen. Was it the mind playing tricks, or was it something else? Clive decided it was something else, something he couldn't explain. And as he locked up and left, the mystery of Cape Willoughby deepened. First, just as suddenly as it went out, his torch went on again. And then...
I looked back at the lighthouse and I could feel something was watching me almost from the top window. And you could almost feel as though there's someone up there. It was really strange, it's quite strange.
But the night was not over for Clive Daniels. The strange happenings had only just begun. The eerie presence that Clive Daniels felt in the Cape Willoughby lighthouse chilled him. The appearance of a silhouette in the lighthouse window had unsettled him greatly. Was his mind playing tricks, or was this dark, brooding landscape home to a ghostly apparition? Perplexed and afraid, Clive returned to the room he was sharing with his wife, Robin. He decided not to disturb her, but it seems that icy, ghostly presence had other ideas.
Shortly after, it must have been about half an hour after, my wife suddenly woke up and she sensed a presence in the room. And she said, "What's that?" And I could feel it too. It was almost that same sort of presence you had in the lighthouse. The sort of the eerie feeling that someone was watching you. Someone was there almost, you know. And I reached up into the air and to see if I could touch it. And it's strange. As soon as you lift your arm, it goes icy cold.
And I said, "Someone's in here," because it felt like someone was watching me. Not like your little daughter coming in and saying, "Mum," you know, when you're asleep. It was like something bigger.
Just shortly after that, the shower started running. And my wife commented to me about the shower running. She says, "Who would be having a shower so early in the morning?" I looked at my watch and it was 2:30 in the morning.
For 15 minutes, the shower continued. And when it eventually stopped, Robin decided to investigate.
I couldn't believe it. There was no mist, there was no steam, the floor was completely dry. No one had, the towels were all neat, the bath mat was still hanging and it was dry. And I came back to my husband and I said, there was no one in the bathroom.
That morning, the party assembled early for breakfast, just after 5 o'clock, in fact.
When my husband came in, he was looking very white, very frightened, and a little bit confused.
And there were questions that had to be asked.
Hey, who's the keen one that got up at 2:30 in the morning and had a shower?
No one could answer that. Not one of them had been anywhere near the bathroom all night. Then, Clive's sister Shirley told them that during the night, she'd had the distinct impression that someone had entered her room.
The shape that I saw was a shape that was on the chair, and I thought, this looks for all the world like there's somebody sitting there, you know. And so I thought, oh, I'm not sure about this, and I waited for the light to flash around the room again to have another look, and sure enough it was still there. And I thought, well, I don't know, it must be luggage or a backpack or something that was left on the chair from the night before. And I tried to convince myself of that fact.
But at dawn, when Shirley checked, the backpack was nowhere near the chair. Stranger still, there was a trail of sand across the room. It hadn't been there the night before, and none of the group had been to the beach. Finally, there was one more thing, the one that finally sent the family packing.
We were all sitting around at a table, and all of a sudden the newspaper that was on the seat next to my wife, the pages started to turn over on their own, and there was no window open, no door, and my wife jumped about, must have been about a foot in the air.
We had to move because they were slightly fearful of what could have happened, and they couldn't explain the unexplained.
Robin and Clive Daniels did try. They discovered that Cape Willoughby Lighthouse looms above a boiling gorge called the Devil's Kitchen. Since records were first kept back in 1847, more than 40 ships have been lost at sea off the coast here. In most cases, sailors lost their lives. And at least one lighthouse keeper died on duty. His name was John Tapley, and he was found dead in the lantern room at 6 a.m. on January the 23rd, 1869. The Daniels now wonder whether John Tapley's still around, or whether the presence at Cape Willoughby is the ghost of a sailor who perished out at sea. Whatever the answer, none will ever satisfy Shirley Buckley.
I wouldn't go and stay the night there again, no. The daytime I'd go to visit because it was a beautiful place and I loved it, but definitely not at night.
And as for Clive Daniels, he did get to write those songs. The lyrics, though, don't offer any explanation for the icy mist, the footsteps, the noises, or anything else that happened that April night at Cape Willoughby.
we're all very sceptical, but it's changed our perspective in life tremendously, to think that what you had beliefs in before and couldn't exist, it does exist. It's out there, believe me.
Rooney has been on the movie screens of the world for most of this century. He's played everything, from 6-year-old boys to crotchety old men. But behind the actor's facade, there is a very spiritual man with deep personal thoughts about this life and the life hereafter. He told us about a mysterious stranger who once appeared before him in a crowded restaurant, a stranger that no one else saw.
There was a time during Hollywood's golden age when Mickey Rooney was the #1 box office star in the world. The little kid from Boys Town then played the title role in the Andy Hardy movies, starred with Elizabeth Taylor in National Velvet, and when he grew up, returned in 1979 with The Black Stallion. No life story in Hollywood has more ups and downs than Mickey Rooney's. He has survived 8 marriages, great success, and great failure, and at the age of 74, he's done it all.
A lot of people have asked me, on your stone, what do you want written? I said 2 words. I tried. That's all.
In his later years, Mickey has settled down some. He's been married to his wife, Jan, for 20 years and devotes his time to writing, performing, and founding organizations like One to Combat Loneliness in the Elderly. Since the day he walked on stage as a toddler, Mickey Rooney has been a trier, though the spark that launched his career was unplanned. He was 18 months old and standing backstage at the Vaudeville Theater where his parents performed.
I couldn't hold the sneeze back, and I went wham! And between this kind of cheesecloth gauze that was made up of the scenery, my dad, who always worked extemporaneously, came in back of it and found me and brought me out on the stage. And that was my first. I wasn't afraid or anything else. I just looked into the warmth of the spotlight, and it was like being in a womb of some type. And I could hear laughter. The first recognition of anything in my life was laughter.
And then there was another serendipitous moment when fate once again had Mickey in the right place at the right time.
I was doing the Mickey Maguire comedies. I went for luncheon one day, and I was going down this thing, and all these little offices, they were dank and dirty and small. They were like 8x9s offices with somebody typing, somebody writing, somebody doing this and that, and a voice. And I stopped and I looked and I saw this silhouette. And I said, hello. And a voice came back and says, hello, who are you? And I said, my name's Mickey Maguire. Who are you? And the voice answered back, I'm Walt Disney. Would you like to see what I'm drawing? And I said, I sure would. So I walked into the office, and he said, sit on my knee. So I sat on his knee, and I looked at this mouse. And I said, gee, that's a good-looking mouse. And he said, what did you say your name was? I said, Mickey Maguire. He said, Mickey. How would you like me to name this mouse after you? I said, gee, that'll be fine, Mr. Disney. Well, I have to go to lunch now. Bang, and off I went. And that is the simplistic whole thing of how Mickey Mouse got his name. It isn't Bert Mouse. It isn't Tom Mouse. It's Mickey Mouse.
As the #1 star in the world, Mickey Rooney was paired with Hollywood's most glamorous. He was married to legendary beauty Ava Gardner. But perhaps it is the winsome, innocent image of Hollywood's golden children, Mickey Rooney and Judy Garland, that lives most vibrantly in memory.
It's always Judy. Judy's every day in my heart. There isn't a day of my life that I don't think of Judy.
Mickey Rooney can tell you firsthand how fleeting fame and fortune can be in Hollywood. From having it all, he suddenly had nothing.
I knew it wasn't going to last. Needless to say, I was very honored as a young man to have been given that honor. But I knew one day I was going to be 18th, 19th. You know, there are three ways of expressing a career. First of all, somebody says, "Who's that?" And somebody says, "That's Mickey Rooney." He says, "Get me Mickey Rooney." And then the second phase of the career is, "Look, get me someone who looks like Mickey Rooney." And the third is, "Who's Mickey Rooney?"
Today, Mickey considers himself a spiritual man. There was a very long, bleak, hopeless time, and then suddenly, an unexplained, otherworldly experience that he claims turned his life around.
I was having breakfast, and everybody was, it was the loudest early morning breakfast with maybe around 300 people. And I was in the middle of the table, and there were about 5 or 6 people on each side of me. And this busboy with hair that was absolutely gossamer. It was gold. It was ethereal looking. And he leaned over very quickly to me, and he said,
"Are you Mickey Rooney?"
And I said, "Yes." He said, "Jesus Christ loves you very much." And he turned and he left. And I was just stupefied. I didn't know how to assimilate what had just been told me. Upon leaving, I didn't ask anybody. I had supposed that people at the table had seen the same young man. He didn't whisper it like this, and he didn't yell it. And I thought somebody else at the table might have heard it too, but nobody saw him, nobody heard him. When I got up, I went to the lady that was taking care of the dining area, and I said, "Where is this young boy with the golden hair?" And she said, "What boy with the golden hair?" I said, "The bus boy who came over to me. You can't miss him. It was almost flaxen. It was incredible." She said, "We have such a person here, Mickey." She said, "You can look all over. Go back in the kitchen if you want." I went all over and back in the kitchen. Was not there. And I thought and I thought and I pondered on it for the longest time. And I went up to my room eventually. And I looked out the window. There was French windows with a little balcony. And he was standing there. And I looked, and he was looking at me. And he said,
"Just as long as you know it."
And I looked down and looked back, and he was gone.
It happened on a lonely road to the southeast of Melbourne. A car crash. Thankfully, no one was hurt. But what followed was way beyond the bounds of any possibility. The odds of what happened could not be calculated by even the most advanced computer. But the story actually began with an old-fashioned handwritten letter from a viewer, from Elaine Smith, who alerted us to this, the Smith saga. She advised us to start just outside Bairnsdale in Victoria with Mrs. Coralie Smith. What we found was that once a week, every week,
Coralie would set out down the Omeo Highway, headed for Bairnsdale to do the shopping. Along the way, she'd always meet her husband Russell on his way home from work in Bairnsdale. They'd stop, have a chat, then continue on their separate ways. It was a routine, part of the Smith family's life that always seemed to fall into place. But on this particular morning, there was already a subtle change in the routine. Coralie's mother, Pauline, was with her. Pauline had an appointment to see her doctor in Bairnsdale, a GP called Dr. Smith. But, as usual, up ahead, there was Russell driving toward them, right on time. But
He passed me this particular day and I thought, he wasn't going to stop. And I looked in the rear vision mirror and that's when I lost it. I just said to my mum, Mum, I've lost the car, close your eyes.
Russell Smith saw the whole thing. A car swerve off the road, roll 3 times, and finally come to rest on its side. What he didn't see was that the driver was his wife, Coralie. That only began to dawn on him as he reversed back to rescue the victims.
He could see that the only way he could get me out was through the front windscreen. He said, I'm going to have to get your mother out first because you're laying on top of her.
Russell worked fast. His wife and mother-in-law seemed okay. Neither was badly hurt, but both were shaken by the crash. It certainly wasn't the tragedy he'd feared. It was, however, about to become a comedy of coincidences, the kind of scenario Hollywood scriptwriters dream about. So, what we have so far is Coralie Smith, Dr. Smith and Russell Smith. An eyewitness has called the emergency services. First on the scene, the local police constable.
When I arrived, they were both sitting in the back seat of her husband's car. That was Russell. They were both sitting there and they were a bit shaken up and a bit nervous, and I just went up to them and asked them if they were all right and what had happened. Is everything okay?
Yes, we're fine. Thank you. I'm just a little bit shaken, that's all.
For the constable, it was a normal accident procedure. Driver's license, name, addresses, etc.
And he just thought it was coincidental. My name was Smith, and he said, isn't that strange? My name's Constable Trevor Smith. And we sort of had a bit of a chuckle and just thought no more of it.
As you'd expect, the ambulance wasn't far behind Constable Smith. And the ambulance officer, you guessed it, another Smith. This time, Ross Smith.
Hello, I'm Ross Smith from the ambulance. How are you? We were pleasantly surprised when we got to the patients and found that they were quite okay. A little bit shaken by their ordeal, naturally enough. But physically, they were quite well.
By now, the shock of the accident was starting to wear off. But the shock of the multiplying Smiths wasn't. Ambulanceman Smith joined the gang and joined the joke.
Not long afterwards, along came the tow truck from Bairnsdale, and this chain of coincidences was about to reach breaking point.
We were still chuckling at that stage, and he said, my name's Smith too, Robin Smith. And from there on, I thought, well, this is it. This is really bizarre.
Basically, the fact that we're all with the same surname but non-related was what gave us probably the break of the monotony that keeps us all sane.
It didn't seem to stop, and it just seemed to get funnier and funnier. And I thought, oh, this is somebody's pulling my leg. This has got to be a joke. It's not April Fool's Day. So what was beginning of a lovely day, a disastrous day, ended up in a very weird and funny day.
The story of 6 Smiths, courtesy of a letter to us from Elaine Smith, who by chance isn't related to any of them. But I hate to tell you, the Smith saga isn't quite over yet. When we first went to the newspaper files to check out the story originally, we just happened to look at the photograph, and you wouldn't read about it. The photograph was taken by yet another one. Another Smith, Ellen Smith. June Bronhill is an internationally famous musical star. Her songs have delighted audiences worldwide. Her stage presence, a rare gift. But June Bronhill has a secret. Her career has been guided over the past 20 years by a friend, an Italian opera singer who died more than 3 decades ago.
If ever I need any help to give me just that little bit of extra energy that I need, I just say, please, Lita, please. She's there.
A scratchy 78. But soaring above the imperfections of the recording is a glorious voice from the past, the voice of Amelita Galli-Curci. Amelita was one of the great Italian opera stars from the 20s and 30s, and she's been an inspiration to the woman they call Australia's First Lady of Song, June Bronhill, OBE. But as you'll see, Amelita's influence is deeper, stronger. She's become a personal guide, perhaps from beyond the grave.
It was a voice in many ways similar to mine, a very high coloratura soprano. But naturally, because this was back in the 20s, the 30s, they didn't have the power of recording that one has now. But it was wonderful, really, then.
A coincidence, or something else. 2 coloratura sopranos, decades apart. Both thrilled audiences around the world, and both would be inextricably linked throughout June's career.
I've always thanked God for my voice, because I was born with it. It wasn't manufactured. I sang my first song when I was 4, and I literally haven't stopped since.
She started her career as plain June Gough, a teenager from the wild west of New South Wales. But on the eve of her departure to study overseas, June decided to repay the loyalty of the folks in her hometown. She changed her name to Bronhill, a tribute to the miners and their families from Broken Hill. As June Bronhill in Europe, she first heard the voice and the name Amelita Galli-Curci.
I was working in London. I lived in London then. And I started rehearsing with a coach that I had, a wonderful Australian coach called Brian Stanborough. And we started working on, of all things, an aria from the Barber of Seville, Una voce poco fa. And he gave me this incredible cadenza at the end, which is very, like a flourish of notes. And it went up to an F above top C, which is a very, very high note. And I found it effortless, absolutely effortless. And he said, I must tell you, he said, that cadenza has only ever been sung once before, and that was by, the only person who ever sang it in performance was Amelita Galli-Curci.
Intrigued, June wanted to know more about Amelita. So much so, she sought the help of a London medium. And in one séance, she finally made contact.
When she came through, she said something like, I am here to speak with the young woman, the young singer. And of course she had a slight foreign accent. She said, she is a soprano. She said, I am Amelita Gallicurci. And I said, you are wanting to talk to me. I'm June Brownhill. She said, my dear, I am always with you. If ever you want to be guided or helped, just be on your own and just put the questions to me. You don't have to say them, just in your mind, and you will find that an answer will come.
Throughout her career, June has done just that. And she says Amelita's answer has always come through. In recent years, she's starred in everything, from The Sound of Music, through Gilbert and Sullivan, to last year's triumph, How to Succeed in Business Without Really Trying. But it was during that great success that tragedy struck and threatened to end June's career. Gradually, she was losing her hearing, losing her pitch, losing her way in the musical numbers. More than ever before, June Brownhill needed her mentor, her guide, Amelita Gallicurci.
I just stand in the wings and waiting for my entrance for that particular big number that I had to do with the Brotherhood of Man. And I just had to say, help me, please, Lita, help me. And it just came to me in a flash, and I'm sure she put it there, switch off, switch off. Don't listen to the other voices, don't listen to the orchestra. Just switch off and work it from what is in your mind, which is what I did, and everybody said, my God, you're singing better than ever. Crazy.
None of our business. If my son's sitting out in that garden with tears in his eyes, I consider it to be very much my business.
Is our Robert crying?
Just stay out of this, Nona. This is a mother's business.
Watch June on stage today, and you'd never know she had problems with her hearing. She's back in the limelight, starring in a play called Straight and Narrow. It was a challenge the diva just couldn't turn down. A decision June's certain Amelita would have applauded.
Naughty talk around this house today from the likes of you.
I'll just do this for you. Even though I can't pitch correctly, I can still think things like, Alleluia, 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 Alleluia. And that is Amelita helping me. I think, oh, how am I going to do it? And I just sort of said,
Please, Lita. Please help me.
Star Anne Margaret has made spiritual contact with the late Elvis Presley.
Just the other day, something happened, and I said, you know, this didn't just happen by chance. It was very, very spiritual, because he was always with me. Of course, God's always with me. Right in here, right in here.
An untold story. Next time.
Anne Margaret and the King. Don't miss that story. We've heard about it, even read about it, but most of us probably don't believe the condition known as spontaneous combustion, where humans literally burst into flame.
It's an event that no one ever thought or dreamed about happening, and it did happen.
Alison Holloway with a story that may make us think again. For now, good night. See you in the future.
This was an instance of spontaneous combustion because there are various things that to this day are unexplained and unexplainable, I think. The fact that she was, in fact, totally exhumed, burned. that the only remnants of her body was a portion of her spine bone and a portion of her foot, the heel of her foot. And that was, everything else was gone.